Welcome back to Puzzled Minds, where we help piece together the interesting things about the universe and help you figure out those 2 a.m. thoughts.
Today, we have Craig, who is a resident in counseling, and Aaron, who is a licensed clinical social worker and certified sex offender treatment provider, for coming on. So, thank you for coming on and joining us.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, today's topic is brought to you by the letter N for norms, and we'll be looking at traditional norms and seeing if it needs to be updated to fit today's society. But before we start, we want to start with the what's got you puzzled, and this segment is where we talk about something that's got you currently puzzled. So for me personally, I have this thing that I've been thinking about. So let's say someone is in need of a blood transfusion. So they go to like a hospital, outpatient clinic, like wherever the setting is, they get their blood transfusion. Now they have the DNA of the donor as well as theirs in their blood. So if, when they receive that blood transfusion and then they commit a crime shortly after,
Would the other person be held accountable, right?
yeah.
Oh, there's no way.
Well, in terms of let's say for forensics, like if they were looking for a person. So let's say, for example, you give me a blood transfusion, right, Aaron? I'm dying. You give me a blood transfusion. I'm good to go. I go out and like rob a bank and shoot somebody. So I leave a DNA sample, but I just recently had your blood transfused in mine. Are you automatically gonna be a suspect too? Because they're gonna be like, yo, this person has that other person's DNA. We see two DNAs, the DNA of a black dude and of a brunette white woman, I'm presuming.
I guess that is plausible that they would have the two DNAs.
But how long? I mean, I guess it would be how long does it take for the blood to kind of just kind of mix and your DNA to kind of wipe away theirs? Doesn't it eventually?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I just thought about it and I was like, it's not really. It's probably like 1 in a billion chance that it happens, but that one chance it'll be on like 48 hours of murder or whatever it is.
Right.
Exactly.
So, but anyway, yeah, that's what's
that condition where people have two DNAs in their body. It's like chimera or something. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Have like two different color eyes is often a sign that two different DNAs in their body.
Oh, yeah, heterochromia, I think that's what it is.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. There's actually a baby that was born with 3 DNAs, and I think we had mentioned this on one of our other episodes, but essentially it's like the mother, the father, and then the DNA of another woman, I guess. So the baby has 3 DNAs. I have to look it up later, and I'll give you the link to what it is.
That's really
it's really interesting. So yeah.
Was it like that thing that they did for research, like splice together 3 people?
Yeah, so it's with what is it called, gene editing, CRISPR.
Yeah,
it's with CRISPR. Yeah. So essentially, they wanted to like bypass a genetic disorder that the mother has, and so they kind of bypassed it by having this woman involved, something like that. And so by doing that, the child now has like 3 DNAs or DNAs of 3 parents, I guess.
It just feels like this gene editing stuff is going to lead to like an apocalyptic situation. Like I just feel it happening. It just seems like it's solving immediate issues right now. Like you said, bypassing some issue that the mother had, but it is, I don't know what's going to happen. We're going to have like a group of like dystopian soldiers taking over the world because they're all made in China and like an assembly line, and Apple's going to be funding it. Like I can see it happening.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Especially Apple and Disney, they'll fund it.
Yeah, Apple and Amazon are currently, Bezos is like pretty much owns everything at this point.
Right.
So, all right. So let's get to today's topic. So essentially today's topic is updating traditional norms. So John and I were talking about this the other day, and essentially what we're thinking about is like how today's climate, like socially, politically, and culturally is just drastically changing. It feels like it's, essentially evolving to something else. And we got to thinking that there are a lot of things that we still do that are really no longer relevant, but we still just do them because that's the way things have been. And one of the ones we touched on was the idea of marriage. That's what kind of generated like this idea where essentially it's like, okay, marriage technically is a union of 2 families, right? The union of 2 houses, let's say. So if I marry, let's say I marry someone, I marry Sally Jones, and I'm Tadiwa Njaga. Why is that we still abide by the custom of essentially the woman giving away her name when technically it's a union of two people? So we thought about the idea of like, rather than, essentially the woman, losing her name, what if there was an exchange of names since we are now one? I take, my name would be Tadiwa Njaga Jones and her name would be Sally Jones Njaga. It seems like it would make much more sense, especially with, equality being something that is a, hot button issue in this day and age with, essentially women fighting for equal terms on every playing field, right?
Mm-hmm. So, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I hear you on that. I think it's just, we are such a society that's stuck in tradition, right? We're stuck in the idea of what is supposed to be, right? So we have these, and so I think that's why we're in such a weird spot in our country anyway, where we have 50% of people believing one thing and 50% believing something else entirely, right? Because it's almost split right down the middle. It's insane. But yeah, I mean, traditionally, the reason was because the woman was given away. It's just like with the marriage ceremony, who gives this woman to this man, right? That's the question that's asked. Yeah. Because
a father was giving away his daughter, essentially.
Right. The parents are giving them away. And, usually, or back in the day, that came with other, perks. It's like, you're not just taking my daughter, but you're also, here's the dowry as well. Just get her out so I don't have to take care of her anymore. It's your responsibility now. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. My wife, Michelle, it took her, we were married for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years before she actually changed her name. Like, she kept her name for a long time. But part of that was because her dad was the only male of his siblings. And so she was the last one with his last name, because everybody else, all of the women had gotten married and changed their names. And so she wanted to hold on to that for a long time. But eventually she said, you know what, we're married, we're starting our own family, so let me go ahead and just change my name. But it makes a lot of sense, that idea,
I think even like more fun would be to just make up a new last name.
Right.
Exactly.
Like, what if we're gonna talk traditions? Like, last names are a really bad tradition, of ranking people, passed on, like, from master to enslaved person. Like, last names are kind of, I think, a little passe anyway.
That's an interesting take, because last names, though, it's a weird level of ownership. Like, since we're getting married, I am now basically claiming you. Here is my stamp, whatever, my seal, and it comes in the form of a last name. And it's never made sense to me in today's climate, because I'm like, marriage is supposed to be about a union, combining. Right. It's not me basically just taking you, like, hey, you're mine now, like, whatever, right? And that's something I've wondered why it's not become more popular. I've seen it before. I think Kim Kardashian did it, where rather than basically change her last name, she added West to it. But for her case, I think it's because the Kardashian name literally has monetary value. So I don't think necessarily. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of hyphenations of names now. But I mean, to speak to that, like, with another part of the reason that Michelle chose to not change her name was because my last name means absolutely nothing to me, right? It's not related to me in any way, because my mom was married, got divorced, but she didn't change her last name. And then she ended up having me with another man. And so I ended up with the first husband's last name. And we just never changed it, right? And so I am the only Simmons, right? I'm the only Simmons in my family. And I have no relation, and I don't even know if I've ever met the man whose name I have. So it means absolutely nothing to me, other than it's always been my name. And so Joe was hesitant, but then she's like, you know what, let's just start our own little thing. This is our own little thing. So we kind of sort of, like what Aaron was saying, made up our own little thing to a degree.
So do you think this is something that people would catch on, or is this a tradition that's going to stick? Because it seems like no one's ever questioned it. Considering all the things people are questioning and changing and updating about society today, it's surprising that this has never become a hot button issue at all, because it is ownership. It's basically a man saying, I own you, right? And considering with the aftermath, like the Me Too movement, all these things, I'm like, I've always been perplexed. Like, why haven't women said anything about that? Like, hey, like, you know, we're a band essentially, dude. Like, your last name's not on this band, right? Like, we're a union. Everyone at the end of the day is equally talented, right? No one's the lead singer in this damn band. So it's one of those things. I'm like, I'm just surprised. Like this has not come up, and it's something that I think like does need updating, but maybe it's just so insignificant. That's the reason why it really has not been an issue.
I think a lot of it has to do with identity too,
I think
because
a lot of people do it
you can
for
go.
ease. You know, it's like I think a lot of people just do it for ease of like enrolling your kid in school. You know, if I've got a kid with a different last name than me, people are going to question that. But I mean, in my circle, you know, I don't know many women who've taken the traditional route of taking their husband's last name. I think it's something that has been changing for the last couple of years.
So you know more women that have like kept their maiden names?
Who have either kept their maiden names or gone with like a different family name.
That's interesting.
Like completely changed?
Like just made up a name, like they were Sally Jones and they're like, I'm marrying you, but now I'm Sally Johnson because reasons.
Yeah, for different reasons. I mean, some people have like significant like trauma related to their family of origin. So it's like, why would I take my last name and my dad's last name if my dad was abusive to me or something like that?
That's they're interesting. I think,
yeah.
You know, and what that means generally.
I guess that makes sense. I mean, I was saying that I think it has to do with like identity in terms of having that last name, and I'm not sure if a lot of people hold on to their last name as like their self-identity factor. You know, like that's the only thing that kind of solidifies their identity. You know, their personality kind of shapes it too, but that's like the hard evidence that like, hey, I am a such and such or whatever, you know, like I am my insert last name. That's who I am. That's what my family has been. It's going to be like, I feel like it's going to be a really hard ship to turn around, and it may or may not turn, but it's definitely not going to be within our lifetime. I don't think so, at least.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, you know, and I definitely associate my, I guess, you know, identity with my last name. Definitely. Cause I don't know, for some reason, I guess bloodline is something that's important to me. It's not like I come from anything like great. I don't know. Maybe I've watched so much Game of Thrones or some shit. And I'm like, my bloodline must go on forever. Like I haven't done shit, you know, but it's one of those things where I just like the idea of, I've always thought true immortality is like, you know, your bloodline going on. So, you know, somebody still knows that back in 2020, you know, Tadeo was out there running around in cosplay and going to cons. So like I like the idea of being remembered to some degree, and I associate that with my last name.
Don't lie.
Exactly. These are all made up facts, guys. Fake news.
2019 maybe, but damn it.
Exactly.
You know, cons this year. So bad.
Yeah, you just want to be remembered. So I guess I associate that with the last name, and I guess, you know, losing it possibly could be like erasing history. So I don't know, but
I think you know, that brings up an interesting point or thought for me, though, is just the idea, and it's one to go back to you guys, is like the things that are perplexing you, this idea that, you know, of marriage being a social construct, right? You know, a lot of people have begun to feel like, well, I don't need to get married. I've been with this person for, you know, this is my partner, we're going to be together, but we don't need a piece of paper to kind of solidify that. And then also, you know, slipping into now, you're saying it's a union, but now, you know, that's growing with pansexuality and polyamory and these things like that. So now people are expanding those unions to be, you know, larger units. So, you know, thinking about what does all that mean, and how does a last name relate to any of that when the unit is more about, you know, this creation of a new entity, I guess, this new cell, if you will. So I don't know. It just makes me think about that idea of like, you know, does that even relate to that piece of, well, marriage is a social construct. So what does the last name mean? The last name mean in anyway? So.
Yeah, very good point. So, all right. So here's another one that I actually have been wondering if it's going to disappear or not, is the idea of chivalry. And chivalry essentially, I guess, to kind of like, I don't know, like put it in like a simplified way, it's almost like essentially a man's way of expressing affection to a woman, but it used to be based off things that technically could be considered almost sexist in this day and age, right? So like the idea of like, opening a door for a woman, that used to be something that, like was chivalrous, right? It shows, manners and things like that. The woman can open that door, but you're doing it for her. Now in this day and age of equality, right, where essentially women are, fighting and have done, an amazing job of, equaling the playing field. Is chivalry truly dead? And does it need to be dead if equality is the main goal? Anyone want to get camp over answering this question?
100%. It's got to go. I mean, even the idea of somebody doing something for me because they think I am incapable in some way, or like that it should be a man's job, is wholeheartedly insulting.
It is, right? And that's the thing I've wondered, like, is that something that was a norm, right? Traditionally, chivalry was always based in this woman. It's like rooted in a man thinking that this woman cannot do this. Oh, there's a puddle in front of me. Let me take off my jacket and, she'll walk over my jacket. She can walk around the fucking puddle. But, realistically, it was rooted in some degree of misogyny, right? And somehow it became a romanticized thing, yet in this day and age, it seems like it's not really applicable. It's almost like the chivalrous thing to do would be to treat someone like an equal, right?
Yeah, I guess, like the whole chivalry thing, I think that it has like the intention of being a good person, but when you look at it in terms of like today's society, it doesn't really kind of like hold up, because no one, like I don't know anyone that puts a jacket on the puddle anymore. If you do, then you're fucking weird, because I don't know anyone that actually does that.
Mm-hmm.
Hold the door. I still feel like people still do that just to be courteous. That's not. I don't see it. Me personally, I don't see it as seeing as someone being incapable. I don't know if that's just like a manners thing, or maybe I'm looking at it in terms of manners, but maybe it is like the other way. I'm not sure. But
I think
for me,
it's a manners thing. You know, when I think of like, let's use a word like kindness in a relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would never expect from a man what I wouldn't do or couldn't do for him.
Okay, that's an interesting take. Because so essentially you're saying that like if you would not do it yourself, you wouldn't expect it from someone else.
Exactly. It's this, and it's really, kind of a good highlighter for a lot of things that in relationships that are inexplicably tied with misogyny. This idea, in all the rom-coms, they have the woman's like, no, I can't do it. As though she doesn't exist until this male character comes around and almost, beats down the door of her heart to be let in or whatever, and how problematic that is in reality.
Where essentially he's hounding her until she submits for
Exactly. And the idea of chivalry, or this idea that some man is going to come swoop in, knight in shining armor, and save me from whatever is going on in my life, as though I am incapable of doing so myself, is just continually oppressive to women.
And that's the thing that I think is, like you said, is problematic, because it's rooted in looking at someone as an inferior, and therefore I have to assist, and by assisting it's going to have the person develop some sort of affection towards me.
Right. And so we get this narrative where women are programmed into believing that they need to be in a romantic relationship, whether it be with a man or otherwise, in order to become fully actualized. And that not only oppresses women, but it also oppresses men, because what we have are broken men and women who are programmed to believe that these human beings are going to come save them from the hole in their heart that can only be filled by themselves. And so we have all these destructive relational patterns.
Damn, that sounded morbid as hell, but I'm sure it's true.
that's a lot deeper insight on that, because I didn't even think about.
Did she
think
just say
about
we're
all
all
that.
fucked and broken? Shit, I think she just did. So
We are,
almost,
though. We all are. We're
yeah.
all broken to a degree. I mean, if we sit back and think about it, we are, and we have to figure out, like Aaron was saying, how do we fill that hole ourselves? The question I had though about it was, well, yes, I agree with everything you said. Is there also a place for the kindness where does it go towards consent? I guess is my question. Like, hey, can I open the door for you? Will you sit there and let me come around and open the door? Do you can that happen, Aaron? I guess is my question is, or should the male just ask the question, would you like me to hold the door for you? Would you like me to come open the door for you?
I think it's always nice to hold the door for someone when convenient, but like, let's say you have a scenario where a person's in a wheelchair and then we have a person who's able to walk, kind of run and cut off that person with the wheelchair to hold the door open. You know, those are two different dynamics. You know, I'm walking out the door, so I'm going to hold the door, as opposed to I see that this person is different than me, whether it's different by their gender or different in their abilities. So I'm gonna swoop in and save this person who might not need to be helped.
Mhm.
You know, and that I think is the consent part.
That's really interesting because I've never even like seen that before. But now that you mentioned that, I could see people like having the intention of trying to help someone else, but like it going wrong. Or I guess the intention is right, but like the execution is wrong. If that makes sense.
Right. You know, and I come from the idea that, you know, most everybody is doing what they know to do the best thing. You know, so that person going to like hold the door open isn't intentionally trying to insult the other person, you know, but it's about just being aware of other people's autonomy.
So essentially giving people's respect to be knowing that they're capable of handling it on their own.
Right. And how powerful of a message that is for everyone.
Oh wow, yeah, that's really interesting that you say that because I didn't even think about the message that you're sending when you let them be autonomous. Like if you're just like, hey, you know, like I know that, I guess you know if we use the wheelchair example, you know, if you let them do it, you know, like just pretend that they're a normal person where you know they're trying to go to the door and you let them, like you know, open the door like they normally would, you're kind of saying that message like, hey, I understand you're there. But you're still in charge of whatever you need to do, like control of your whole body and stuff like that. And I didn't even think about that whole message that you're sending.
Yeah, like I would have just automatically done exactly what Aaron said. Like I would have probably cut them off to open the door because I'm making the assumption that this person has not developed any sort of skill set to overcome this hurdle. And in turn, that could be actually insulting to that person. You know, maybe, I mean, obviously it's different from how I would open a door, but doesn't mean that they're not capable of doing it and they may actually prefer to do it because that may mean something a lot to them, that they're able to do something that maybe I take for granted or see as a very, I guess, insignificant task.
So the another one that Titi and I had talked about was, I think male solely proposing versus female, or you know, I guess anyone else proposing. And so when Titi and I had talked about this, you know, I had asked my wife, and she said like she wouldn't feel comfortable with that if she had done it, and I can't remember the reason why. I think she said that I can't really remember, but regardless of what it is, I think it's a thing that it's kind of like the whole last name thing, where it's kind of like a tradition where it's so ingrained in us that it's not like if Fiona did if my wife had done that to me, I would feel kind of weird about it, which is it's just not normal. And I told Titi about this example where if you think about it, I kind of relate it to cell phones and how in like the early 90s or whatever, it was really weird to see someone with a cell phone. But as time progresses, you know, you see that more and more people have cell phones, and so it's more normalized. So I guess the question is, you know, when we see these people that don't traditionally propose, is that just going to be something that we're going to see later on? It's just not something now that we see like in the moment.
This is a tricky one because there is a degree of like the word you use, like when John said weird. For most men, I think what we're actually saying is we feel a degree of emasculated
Mhm.
because essentially it's seen as a, I guess the act of proposing is seen as, I don't want to say a masculine thing, but according to like I guess traditional hyper masculine rules, like a man gets on one knee, proposes to this woman, right? And for a woman, I guess to do that, I guess in a cisgender relationship, in this is the example I'm using, I guess for some degree, I guess the man feels like he's losing some sort of power. Like it seemed like he basically is. I don't know what it is. This is gonna be weird, but it feels like he's being like spiritually pegged by the woman, by basically like her in a position of power, being like, no, let's do this forever, happily ever after, right? And that the thing about it's like for some reason when the second you take out masculinity versus femininity in that situation, it loses all the complexity of it. I feel like there's no problem with it. But when I'm thinking with, a cisgendered brain, I find myself in the same position where I'm like, ah, man, that's something that I would feel, I guess, weird about as well too. But reality is, I'll just feel emasculated by it. Where basically, my girl gets on one knee and puts a ring on my finger. But when John and I were talking about it, we were wondering, it's like, let's say, for example, if let's say it becomes common enough that, let's say both sexes propose, or, I guess nowadays there's more than one sex, but let's say, for example, a man and a woman, or it became very common that it was an interchangeable task. What if the way that a woman would propose would be different? It wouldn't be getting on one knee, because I think when we associate with how men propose, that's where the quote unquote emasculation comes from. Versus if, let's say, there's a new tradition where a woman proposes, it could be something different.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it could be something different where basically maybe it'd be a tradition where, I don't know, I couldn't even begin to think of how a woman could present it in a way that wouldn't hurt all these little, like, hurt dudes be like, oh man, my girl proposed to me, now I feel like less of a man.
What if it's as simple as just asking? Like, why do we have to have an action with it, I guess, if that makes sense? Like, we have this association with proposing with men, I guess, just with kneeling, but why does it have to be an action, I guess? Like, can't you just flat out ask? Like, why do we have to complicate it?
Complicate everything.
Also, I think in relationships in which a woman might be proposing, they might be a little bit more progressive and perhaps not even want to get married, which is why we don't see it as much, perhaps.
I guess, yeah, that's the thing. Because when people say like progressive, isn't progressive, the word like progressive essentially is something that's just ahead of the time that's currently transpiring in, right? Like at one point in time, I'm sure, like, I can't think of something else like progressive. Like, I feel like our generation is just like, quote unquote, is leading the charge in every single thing that the future generation is going to reap the benefits of. But at one point in time, things that, are commonplace today were, considered progressive back in the day. So I'm wondering if, go ahead, Craig. Sorry.
To stay with your topic, moving from like asking the father's permission to marry, like asking for the father's, like, may I have your daughter's hand in marriage, to now where the man just says, hey, I want to marry this woman, and then they might meet the parents later, So even that is progressive. Where we are now is progressive compared to previous times where, we were man was expected to go to the father first and say, may I have your daughter's hand in marriage before the next step, before he asked the wife or the fiance. So yeah, so things do change over time. It's a slow progress. But again, a lot of it's tied to just, I think, traditional thought, even the idea of marriage in itself, I think only within the last, 100, 150 years has become more about romance than it was before. It was about property. We are we're joining these two families because it's beneficial to both families for us to have this union for land, for property, for whatever reason, for status.
Or to stop wars sometimes.
Right. And now it's more about I like this person, this person likes me, and so we want to be together. So that's changed over time. So all of it changes. It's a slow, it's a slow progress, and sometimes that people have to be pulled into the next generation. But I don't know. I your description of it was perfect. I think, Tadiwa, about that emasculation piece, because when you said it, like, I consider myself to be a pretty progressive thinker in terms of like sex and sexuality and these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But when you said that, and I pictured my wife asking me to marry her, there was a twinge of like,
but a little tingle, a little bit,
right.
something.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Because we talk about this, but when we're saying that being emasculated is the problem with with this tradition, right, on switching it for equality, that leads me to believe that that's a toxic masculinity issue right there.
Mm-hmm.
That, if you're holding on so tightly to your masculinity that you can't look at this person that you love and are planning on loving forever, and allow them to ask you to marry them. Like,
mm-hmm.
the love of your life is like, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And the thought is, oh, wow, that's really emasculating. Like, you could have the hottest chick, wife, like,
mm-hmm.
ready to go, like, wants to spend the rest of her life with you. She loves you. She's beautiful, amazing. She hung the moon for you. And that's going to be what the triggers, that's the feeling that's triggered. Like, isn't that the problem?
No, you're 100% right.
Yeah,
100%.
that was a gut punch right there.
Yeah, exactly.
When you said that, I was like, oh.
Yeah. Like, if she proposes to me, bro, I won't be able to bench 315 because my testosterone's gonna drop. Like that, Aaron, you are dead on it. Like, that is 100% the problem. Like, toxic masculinity seems to have seeped its way into certain things, and like, I literally have zero rebuttal because there's no excuse. Like, the way you said it, like, the love of your life wants to spend the rest of her days with you, and you're like, nah, you can't ask though, I have to ask you.
I promise you my dick is bigger. What?
Like, this ruins your whole marriage. Like, oh, she asked me that we're happy, but she asked me, and it kind of ruined the marriage.
Like, yeah, so that's a really good thing to poll, because I really want to see. So if your like celebrity crush was like really into you, and she was like, hey, I think we should spend the rest of our life together. Would you marry me? I wonder how many people would say no. That's really like, I just thought about that, and I'm just gonna say a lot of people will say they won't care because it's like their celebrity crush. You don't think so?
Mm-hmm. I think you might be right about that, because I think people are going to use the, I guess you can say, like, the exceptional circumstances to justify that's what they're going to do. They're going to be like, oh, well, dude, it's fucking Salma Hayek, bro. Like, he knocked on my door, punched my dad in the face and said, I want your son. Like you use that to justify, of course I had to say yes. But if it was someone under regular circumstances, I think, to Aaron's point, that toxic masculinity is about to show up and be like, nah, bro.
Well, and then I think that brings up a great point, because, a woman's power is in her looks, right? If we're using
mm-hmm.
this as an example, right? So, really when we're calling something masculinity, what we're saying is our power. And so if you have this woman, this beautiful supermodel, I don't know who's popular right now, but when we're giving the example of having like a movie star ask you, well, that's a woman of high status, of high power, right? Because she's beautiful, mm-hmm. because other people perceive her as beautiful, but your wife, per se, is beautiful to you, right?
Exactly.
Which isn't as powerful as being beautiful to the world, but that should be powerful in that context of that relationship.
But if she is your world, then she is popular to everyone then, right?
Exactly.
There you go. Look, there's that loophole right there.
Dang, dude. Aaron's just solving the problems of the universe right now. Because I literally didn't think about it. I was like, damn. Like, this is like, you just fixed probably like 29 years worth of toxic masculinity just seeped out of my pores right now. It's like, oh, God. I need to go to Starbucks. Oh God, I need my wife to propose to me, my girl to propose to me. Like, I think it's just one of those things where I hope that honestly we can get to a point where, like, things like that, like as insignificant as, you know, how someone's asked, like, this goes out the window. Because right now, like, the way you explain, I'm like, why is that such a major issue? And I guess I wonder if, like, with same-sex relationships, is that something they even remotely have to deal with?
I would imagine, you know, in a same-sex relationship that they're dealing with it, but they've probably been dealing with it for a longer period of time. Because in our heteronormative society, right, we don't question our sexuality unless there's a question, right?
Okay.
So it's not like one day you woke up and you're like, daggone, man, I am straight. I really think I'm straight. Let me think about how straight I am. You know, but people who are growing up in our society, you know, that's kind of some of the thought processes that have, you know, come up in working with LGBTQ and people, and just people in general who are questioning their gender, their sexuality, all of those things. They are going through that toxic, understanding that toxic masculinity. And I'm, you know, still think that cis white gay men have a lot of work to do with their toxic masculinity and how it intersects with racism and privilege.
How so? Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
So I think that oftentimes people in positions of privilege who are also marginalized in one way, aren't looking at all the intersections, particularly white cis men, because they benefit a lot from our culture and perpetuate really kind of some toxic things. I'm going to call out, you know, using kind of blackface as humor in speech and cadence, and you know, using AABV in like as humor.
Wait, what is that? What is AABV?
It used to be called, what did it used to be called, Craig? Ebonics.
Ebonics, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So yeah, I guess the power dynamics can sometimes lead to toxicity from what it sounds like, and
Right.
And I guess, you know, I've always wondered the reason why with same-sex marriage is I wonder if, I guess they seem more seemingly successful because they don't have certain power dynamics that seemingly heterosexual relationships have, where essentially where a lot of heterosexual, I guess, men, this might be a blanket statement, but I'm gonna roll with it for now. So if I get canceled, whatever. But I think that like a lot of heterosexual men always see themselves as like the head of the household, because a lot of people are told like the man is the head of the household, the man's a leader, you know, you lead your wife, and everyone else is just like, even if you look at that little sticker you see in the back of minivans, like the dude first, the wife, and then 3 little kids following. It's almost like a hierarchy in a very subtle way, right?
Yeah.
But
it's not subtle.
Thought about it like that.
Yeah.
It's not subtle though, and a lot of that comes from, and you know, I'm a Christian, cisgendered male, right? And so there is a lot when you are raised that way, believe, like, you know, the covering, it's called covering, right? So God covers me, I cover my wife covers the children. There is a hierarchy that exists because of that. And so there's a struggle, like there's a struggle for me sometimes in having conversation with my wife around like, how do we, because the word, you know, the word in the Bible that I think most married couples argue over is the word submit. There's a word, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, you know, wives submit to your husbands, and there's conversation around that word, like what does that mean to submit? And really it's about conversation, it's about having conversation and trusting one another. But because of the way it's written and because of the way it's taken in, there becomes this hierarchy, and we have to figure out like, well, really, and because of, you know, the wording, a lot of people, like, again, I don't want to go into a religious thing, but a lot of people take that from, you know, Eve was created as a helpmate, right? And so that becomes the genesis and becomes for no pun intended, but that becomes the start of where people take that from, right? So this is my helpmate. She's here to help me, right? But it's still a partnership, right? If you look at it and really read it, it's about a partnership working together to do things. And so I think that's where a lot of the toxic masculinity comes from. A lot of it comes from the church, honestly. I mean, again, I'm a Christian male, love God, but a lot of that comes from religion, not necessarily Christianity, but religion, and how religion is taught to us, and how we are expected to behave because of it. But a lot of it, and I think Aaron's point about privilege is so on point in terms of like that has a lot to do with how we approach a lot of social norms and why a lot of things are stuck the way they are. Because if we challenge those things, we're challenging other people's privilege. And if you challenge my privilege, then I have a problem with you, right? So I can agree with all your thoughts. I can agree with those things, but I might not necessarily vote for that candidate or support that particular bill, because if I do, then it's going to hurt my privilege. And so that's where we have to kind of figure out how do we use our own privilege, and how do we step aside from that privilege to kind of challenge some of those social norms.
Damn, that was a lot. I feel like this conversation has changed me as a person physically. But yeah, so I mean, so let's go through like the topics we've covered, and I want to get an opinion from everyone whether it's something needs to be updated or leave it as it is, and then we're gonna wrap this thing up. So first topic we talked about was marriage and the last name. So I guess we'll start with Aaron. Is that some
updated?
Updated? Okay, so your vote's updated. What about you, Craig?
I like the updated. I like the creating your own last name. I like that idea.
And you, John?
Yeah, that's fine. We can update it. I don't really see any like harm in it. And so there's not really a, if you do like the cost benefit, there's not really any like negative consequences of doing it. I don't really see anything wrong with it, I guess. So logically it makes sense.
That's cool, because I also am in the camp of updating it. So I'm just going to change my last name to Nike Tracksuit.
Love it. Let's get crazy with it.
Exactly. Let's just get wild. Just Nike Tracksuit and jogger. Let's roll. So all right, the second one was chivalry. So we'll start with Craig this time around. Update it or leave as is?
I think we need to update it. We need to move to a culture of consent.
Okay, cool. And Aaron?
Update it.
All right, cool. And John?
Oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know where I stand with it. Honestly, it's because I understand like the whole consent thing, but I guess I'm looking in terms of like manners, like the whole like I'm only harboring on like one issue, and it's the door thing, because that's the only I can think of. But I don't know. I'm gonna go with
undecided.
Yeah, let's go with undecided.
All right. And I'm in a camp of, I guess this is technically updated, but I'm saying like essentially get rid of it, because I feel like it has no place, at this point. I think that it's even from what Aaron said, it's like kind of too saturated with toxicity and, like misogyny. And I don't know if it's repairable in the sense of like fixing things that have been done rather than just getting rid of them. And then last one was the proposal. So start with you, John.
Yeah. Well, after we talked about it, it makes more sense. I always tell people this. Like when you get married, you're kind of like a single entity. You become one, and so from that standpoint, that logical view, I guess it. As much as it, like I said before, like it feels weird. Like I mean, people want to do it, go ahead. Like if you want to do it, go ahead. That's fine. But let's update it. I guess that's the word we want to use.
Okay. And Aaron?
Update it.
Update that thing. Okay. And Craig?
Yeah, after Aaron's gut punch, I think we have to update it.
Yeah, Aaron just forcefully made all of us aware of our masculinity, our fragile ego. So yeah, I'm going to update it as well too. So I'm gonna expect a big ass diamond on my hand. I'm gonna be crying, all kinds of stuff. I'm going full Pisces mode.
Yes.
Full blown Pisces.
Pisces Nike tracksuit. That's what we're gonna call you.
Like
Now.
a Pisces Nike tracksuit. I'm about to change my social security card tonight.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Craig and Aaron, for coming on.
This
You know,
is fun.
Thank
This was
you.
a lot of fun, guys.
Thank you.
Can we give a quick plug of our new podcast?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, tell them what it is, what it's about, and where they can find you, and all that good shit.
All right, so Aaron and I just started a new podcast. If you want to hear more of Aaron's amazing brain, we're Pleasure is Your Birthright is the name of the podcast. Right now we're on Podbean and a few other places, so search and you can find us. The quickest way to find us is to go onto IG and look for @Pleasure Birthright, and that's how you can find us on IG @Pleasure Birthright.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, well, I'll definitely link it in the bio and all that stuff, so that way people can check it out. If you like this podcast, smash that like button, follow button wherever you find us. Follow us on the social media platforms. Puzzle Minds Podcast on Instagram, and Twitter is Puzzle Minds Pod. Last but not least, thank you, Official Block of the Week, for the weekly cover arts that we have. Amazing as always, and thank you again for all those. Other than that, everyone stay puzzled.